Hello, and welcome to Scatterbrained 2.0 today. This is the second official video of the channel. So, what I want to talk about today is should be on your screen, and really, it's an extremely important topic to try and make sense of some things. And I've always enjoyed theory and considering different ideas that especially help make sense of things, especially really far fetched or things that have a lot of inputs or a lot of information swirling around them. And that and that really and that's I feel like that ends up becoming extremely important in a obviously the larger picture is having some of these ideas that we can kind of coin as that's what does that. And that makes sense. So in today's society, there's been something that's just been in the back of my head, just crawling, trying to get out and trying to make sense of things, because it feels like we do have societal issues, not just locally, but globally. And because different countries are affected differently and different cultures are affected differently, it really makes it even more obvious to me. And what really put the nail in the coffin before I had already had this concept, but before I even really decided to publish this, was the mass formation psychosis kind of being explained by a few different doctors, and that that theory really made a lot of sense for a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today. And now the impact of that going mainstream and that concept being kind of put out there, I really do think has shifted a lot of people's minds on the possibilities that, hey, you know what, this there's really some merit to this. This could really actually be something that's influencing humanity on a large scale. Like, it helps explain like how something like Nazi Germany could have manifested, and how we've had different uh, political issues or societal issues that have manifested in the United States. Why there's this currently this anti-American push, and like tear it all down mentality, and why could something like that manifest, and how hyperbolic it is and how effective it can be despite any logical and informative trying attempts to try and break people out of that spell. It's really incredible. So mass formation psychosis is really it's brilliant, and it's hopefully helping a lot of people make sense of some of the issues we're dealing with right now in our society, really important ones. But to kind of coincide with that, the free floating anxiety that they talk about that needs to be present, in my views, with innumerable information expanse, effectuate, dystopian theory. I've expanded this theory, and by no means does it have to be all of these words exactly. I'm more so just trying to build a puzzle and see how the pieces fit. So far, this seems to be the best, the enough pieces for this to feel like it mostly complete. And by no means is a theory ever concrete. It's not fact. It's something to explore and a way of looking at things. So with innumerable, we just breaking down definitions, and I'll explain how this applies to everything that we see and do today, and why it is an aspect that should be, or at least should be considered, especially by a lot of psychologists, especially by most theorists. But innumerable, really, just like too many to be numbered. With information today in education or whatever, wisdom, there's books that are countless. And I really think this does stem back as far as what I would consider this theory is applicable as early as written language or spoken language. And then when people started to build cities or gather in large groups where they would share ideas, that's when this started to launch. Like where you could actually go and this is how you make fire, right? And then you have this village that then teaches, like, this is a fundamental aspect of our culture now, is everyone needs to learn how to make fire like this. So they spread this information. We teach each other, and then somebody from that village moves off to start their own village or whatever it might be, and then this skill is now part of our is a piece of information, a technique that then in it, and because it's such a new and amazing thing that has been discovered, and it can literally change your life. It spreads like wildfire, no pun intended. And that kind of a concept is like, all right, so then we create written language, we create books. You can now take a book written by somebody that has things that somebody may have never been exposed to. They go to another part of the world that has a small village or a large village, and then they can explain what these words mean, and they break down the language. They learn another culture's language through somebody else sharing that information that is now transported, as really all our computers are. It's really, they're like these little mini packets of books and pictures and stuff flying everywhere all the time at any time. And I could just Google something and pull it up. And so when the internet comes up, I mean, holy moly, like, and before the internet, TV obviously, and radio, and there's so many inventive things that have exploded. And so what I was gonna make a diagram on here, but I guess a visual would be like looking up at space and seeing all the stars and thinking of constellations, and how all these stars presumably are all moving away from each other, right? Like an explosion from a big bang. And so you have all of these concepts, and we're only and if we consider that we're discovering more and more of these stars, and some galaxies are still in development. This is how crazy some of the discoveries we've made recently are. So as far as they're concerned, this galaxy might just have started, whereas ours has supposedly been around for around 14 trillion or so. As far as we think the universe has been established. And things like that. And these numbers are just like, we're trying to figure this crap out, but we keep finding things that tear it down. So, but if we think of information as the Big Bang, right? Like it's literally expanding so fast and rapidly that if I'm like an electrician over here on this constellation, there's the dietitian over here, and we're like growing so far apart. How the heck do we connect our information? How can I go from being an electrician to being a dietitian or a nutritionist, or to being a carpenter, right? And then we have like how it used to be that you didn't have so much information in each one of these areas. It literally, I would be a dentist, if I back in the day, I would be the dentist. I would be the lawyer. I would be, it was whoever was the most educated person had the most, I guess, intellectual skills, the most high-end skills. Someone that would literally learn how to do a procedure from a book or just from taking risk. They were just the most intelligent person in a community, and they were then, therefore, essentially the doctor or the, you name it. And a lot of this takes a lot of experience to kind of really let it manifest and kind of absorb into you. But like the founding fathers, even back when they would only let the educated, vote, it was because of this. They didn't want somebody who had no interest in politics, and this is, again, my interpretation. I'm not a founding father. But the idea is you wouldn't want somebody who has no frickin' clue about an area, like politics. Like, we just went through a war to try and break off. Like, we died, many people had to die. Had to sacrifice so much to create this doctrine that says we are independent. And we do not want to have another war. So how do we come together as a country, figure this crap out in this experimental social program that allows us to have as many freedoms as possible while not becoming the very thing that we fought to leave, right? So how do you do that? Well, we need to protect these freedoms. We need to have people that protect the wants and needs of the people, and it needs to be possible to evolve and change for the times. Because by no means they had different weapons now than they did 1,000 years ago. They are aware of that, and they have different issues then. There's written language. People can send a letter from one part of the country, the new country, to the other, and it would only take a week, or whatever, for that message to get there. That's a lot faster than it used to be when you didn't have horses, or whatnot. So they're aware that, not that they knew how it would become and what it would become, but that the world was going to continue to change. But the thing that wouldn't change is people's need for freedom. And once that's taken, to get that back, if you could even get it back, the cost would be so great that it would not be fun. So to understand how we get here, when you have this great expanse of information expanding so rapidly, I feel like it's important that we acknowledge that some of the consequences that can come from the expanse of information and the inability for our energy, we just don't have enough time. And a lot of people don't want to learn how to be a carpenter, or a physician, or a nurse, or even a garbage man, or I couldn't just go hop in a garbage truck and just drive around willy-nilly cleaning up the streets, or servicing different houses, and I wouldn't know what to push. I'd have no freaking clue. Now, would it be impossible to learn? Hell no. I'd be able to pick it up, but it's definitely not something that you could just do immediately without any experience. I'd have to have some coaching to do it effectively. Now, if I had time to mess around with it, I could figure it out probably. But these are all things you put anyone in, and I've experienced this for a number of years, being a personal trainer. People that were masters of their field, that I would then get in front of, and they knew nothing about how to move their body, about how to maintain it, how to improve it, how to get healthy. And it would baffle me how you'd have such a brilliant mind who had never really considered what they're putting in their body would affect it so much. And that really, in doing years of this, it's really important to acknowledge, wow, we really do have this information overload. So initially, this theory was considered to be information expanse dystopian theory. But since I've wanted to add more steps to it, so the innumerable, there's just too many to be numbered. And I think that that's important, because the more we look, the more we find. And that's one amazing constant in information, is the more you know you don't know. And that very concept is applicable, and it's been hard to disprove that so far. And then, so innumerable information, knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. Pretty straightforward. So innumerable information expands, the distance or amount of expansion. So just the sheer volume or size of the universe is just so hard to even comprehend. So how do you make plastic? And there's 10,000 plus different kinds of plastics, and they're discovering more all the time. How they can put the molecules together. And we're in a constant era of new discoveries in each of these fields still. There's no field that's done growing and expanding. That's, again, what's incredible. So how do you keep up? And then the issues in society that stem from, you need to be a specialist, or you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I don't necessarily agree with that by any means, but to a degree, if I had an issue with my eye, why would I want to go see a guy that is more specialized in metals, right? Metallurgy, or he's a blacksmith, but then he knows a lot about eyes. Not that that can't happen, but in today's society with the Expanse, I want to know who or what this person knows and how they can apply it for me. That would be right out of the gate probably more valuable to my circumstance than somebody who's a blacksmith that, hey, I know some stuff about eyes. So the Expanse is really kind of that visual, and then the Effectuate, to cause or to bring about something into effect or operation. So effectuately, like that, because of the Expanse, that's what's causing these issues. I can't become a master archer while being the best rock climber in the world because of these. I can't keep up with both of these fields, or the best 100-meter swimmer. Obviously physicality would physical effects would come into play with that too, but you could say that that's still how we learn, like the physical structuring of the mind. We still don't know enough about the brain to know how the heck we learn the way we do. We think we have a grasp of it, but that's, again, continually changing and evolving. So to effectuate is to cause or bring about something into effect or operation. And I think that that's from the Expanse, from that massive amount of volume and distance, with these informations, the information being so spread out, and growing and so volumetric, where there's just so much. You have a star versus, Pluto in information. Like nanotechnology, when that first came out, and I was in high school when I first got exposed to that, like there wasn't a ton of information yet in that field, but the potential was incredible. Whereas every computer wanted to get smaller. Well, how do you do that without nanotechnology? So they knew that even though there wasn't a lot known, that field was going to explode, and it only has gotten bigger and bigger. And ultimately, even today, like computing power, without nanotechnology, computing power would be stagnant at the moment. We would have to make things bigger instead of making things smaller. So you'd have a computer the size of a house still, just because we never had a way or understood or thought of the way to make computing or capacitors and all of these different things, these components, so much smaller to still do the same job. Dystopian. Now, dystopia and dystopian was an important word to include in this because just reading this here, of or relating to or being an imagined world or society in which people lead dehumanized, fearful lives. Now, dystopia, or my earliest exposure to a dystopian world was utopia. In like The Giver, right? In school, everyone had to read that. Well, it's kind of like like a pretend world, a world where that wouldn't exist in our current state of things, but in a manufactured world where you could neuter everybody's brains, it might be possible, at least for a period of time, as long as things stayed homogenous. Well, dystopian is just not realistic, and it's like just saying that everyone's the same, like right now these big words are racism, equality, equity. Nobody with a brain disputes equality, right? The right to have rights. Everyone's pursuit of the same opportunities, equality and opportunity. But the equity in opportunity is not realistic. Equity, everything just being equitable means you have to take from something to give somewhere else, because no one starts at the same place. Nobody. Even the fact that you want to take something from this person and give it to this other person, that's not equitable, because then that person will then pass this other person because they were given the tools that this person that were stolen from this person. So there is no way to make this work as a math problem, because we are not simple math problems. And it's not simple economics where I can just take this one thing, put it over here, now everyone's even. and everything's fair. So living in these worlds where we think that that's true just because we want it to be true is a dystopian world. It's really a dystopian belief, and that's important as the information's expanding. Our pretend that we can control what happens with this expansive information and how happy our lives will be the more we learn is really not realistic. We need to be just as aware and of the dystopian world that we are creating, dehumanized lives with a list of things that I'm going to go over here in a second. But really, more and more people are afraid. We're not connecting the same, and we are becoming more isolated, and our information is only growing. So what the heck is going on? I think that because, and I'll just go to the last slide before I finish my final set on this part. Theory, an idea or set of ideas that is intended to explain facts or events. So we have our first one, Innumerable Information Expanse Effectuate Dystopian Theory. So we have this a number of problems right now in society because of the expanse of information that is causing a problem and is making it so that I just don't even want to become a physician. Like, because of the amount of information that I would also be required to know, which is in many ways a good thing, but in many ways a bad thing because we're missing out on people that are extremely skilled in areas. Like, I know for a fact I could be a very effective physician. It's something that I have passion about and I learn very rapidly, but I cannot be handed a book and become a master of information that way. I cannot be given a lecture or a class and just learn that way. I wouldn't. Where I would dominate would be in practice, and seeing patients, having information discussed in a room where I learn about heart disease. Right. Those are the kinds of things that I would be. That's just how I learn. So. But so much of the foundation to become a physician needs to come from the studies, needs to come from all of these other resources in our current process of achieving that title, right? So I would have no clue how to fix my car right now, especially if something was going on with a computer component. So all of these things, and it's so far, I'm so far gone now where I just don't, I'm almost paralyzed at the even thought of it. I'd be like, I'm gonna have to have my car towed. There's no way. I'm gonna do more damage by opening up my car and trying to fix it myself. And the consequences of the evolution of that, the expanse of our information, is creating massive problems in these gaps, the space between. Like, I want to go to Mars. There's no way I can personally get there. But as humanity is getting better and better, like, there's actually a possibility we will have humans on Mars in my lifetime. That's incredible. But what about another galaxy away? Well, that is probably extremely unlikely. But in my kids' lifetime, who knows? Technology, man, is growing rapidly, and there's some incredible things on the horizon. So, yeah. So some of the things that, some of the areas of our lives that are so affected by this theory that I would like to coin and try and at least put out there so that people can use it and apply it, test it, stretch it, beat it up, and then refine it, is going to be for let's see this here. It's going to be for this part, where so we just consider technology, because technology is the essentially the purveyor, the spreader of information right now, and it's really one of the stars. It's probably more like a black hole. It's we have found in our world in understanding that technically every time we look at the center of a galaxy, there's a black hole. And before we had made that discovery, it was like, oh, black holes, man, they're this chaotic thing that you'd never want to, you don't want them to exist. They're terrible, they're dangerous. And then we find that they're essential to probably everything. They're one component that must exist in order for anything to exist. And that discovery totally changed that mentality. And so our understanding of an applicability of this theory to all of these things will hopefully help have that similar effect where we can tip the scales a little bit. So technology's influence over these areas of modern life. So just think about social media. I mean, social media is everywhere. There's been a million presenters, a million TED Talks on social media, and all media for that matter. But just the expanse of even just how media is delivered. You know, I barely ever watch regular TV, if ever at all, anymore. So that my nightly news, that is no longer part of my routine as a kid growing up. Parents always did that. So that change is now changing how I'm influenced, and instead I get my resources from other select people that I more so trust, people that I can kind of vet. I can look at their history. So I'm more careful with the ideas I'm exposed to because I am heavily aware of bias and media bias. Banking, just the convenience of banking, not having to have a physical dollar on me, and I can go and do all of these things. Our understanding of that, as much as it's convenient to now, I can go pay with my phone and swing it by something, or even my watch, right? I have no way of understanding that. I don't know the code. I don't know how that money is transferred. I just hope that it's the right amount that transfers, and I go back and I try and check, right? It's another thing I have to do to make sure. But otherwise, I just have $20. I know how many I have left in my hand. With this change, this information growth, that it changes even just how I interact with purchasing things. And now someone could steal $5,000 from me right now while I'm talking to you. I would have no idea. But if we only had physical dollars to spend, I would know. I would know if someone is taking that, more than likely, unless I'm not home and they know right where it is under my mattress. So, healthcare. I mean, when's the last time you walked into a hospital and didn't hear or see any technology? Holy moly, how healthcare has changed and how it will continue to change as it continues to evolve. It's incredible. All of the things that go into healthcare with technology, and how many people you walk into a hospital and a doctor knows how to make a saline bag, just an IV bag, just a drip, or how they actually manufacture the tests to see if you have a STD. They don't make any of these things, they just use them. And that's really incredible, because how many things in there do they actually know? One massive thing that blew my mind was when I would be training a physician in trying to help them get healthier. And there's a lot of reasons for why anyone would come and see me, and a physician's no different than a teacher or some other profession coming to see me to try and help them with their health. They're just looking for another resource to, a lot of times, to simplify the process for them. But it'd be amazing to me to learn and to pick their brain about things, that how little information you could be a physician and how little you would know in some of the areas of health as well, like basic health. Not necessarily their expertise, but because of this information expanse, they specialized as a ear, nose, and throat doctor, right? But they didn't know the level of impact, because they hadn't been exposed to it, that vitamin A or E or vitamin C might have on these components, because they're only seeing a situation, and practically they're only seeing situations that you go ahead and take your vitamin, but you already have this issue. So they don't even learn about these contributing variables that why someone would even be in that scenario to see them, because they're already in a situation where they just need to fix the problem. It's like it'd be like asking why, when a car manufacturer or why a mechanic needs to know what goes into the rubber in your tire. No, I have a flat tire. Can you just fix it? Well, let me tell you how they make this tire. First, they take the steel, they weave it, and they put it, and then they pour the rubber mold in. No, I just fix my flat tire. So that's essentially how we've treated our medical and healthcare professionals. Is I want, if I could choose, I find somebody who wants to know how all these things work. I am all for that. I want to find that discoverer, the person that never stops, because they will see how all of these things apply to their field. It's just, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work, and it takes drive to want to know that. And it doesn't mean you can't do the thing you do that is the result without having to discover all these things. But somebody who's a true fan of what they do, and an artist, will look at every component that goes into their field or their craft and want to get better, because they'll know the importance of that and its applicability. And you won't be able to turn that part of your brain off as a true scientist or a discoverer. So, and it's not easy. So, dating, I mean, you name it. Swipe left, swipe right. Seeing my younger brother go through a kind of his life into adulthood as a bachelor for so long, and seeing what he would go through in order to just to meet people. Obviously, he would still go out to bars every once in a while and whatnot, but not that that's the pinnacle, the quintessential way to meet somebody, but seeing how that has changed for him versus, how I experienced dating. Maybe in some ways it would have been better, but me being someone who's more of a recluse, more reserved, that would have been probably a nightmare, because I was still single and did go to a couple of dating apps or whatever, but I had to be on my computer. They weren't even on my phone yet, in order to just kind of see what's out there, and even just Facebook really was a dating app. If being able to see pictures of people wasn't possible, Facebook probably never would have been a thing. Because early on, what made it what it was the ability to meet somebody, and then you could find a way to connect with them, and you could spy on them. You could snoop on them. You could say, oh man, they're single. You didn't even have to ask them in person. You could get information and intel without having to be right in front of them. And so then you could figure out, like, oh, I really like this person. And the ability to network and connect, then they were part of your network, and you could just send them a message, or you could publicly, like, poke them, and this thing. And it was incredibly more social in a way, to a degree, and early on, which is how all of these things start. They start from the gift they provide, the potential that they have, and then what happens is then it breaks down into all these things. You get all of these super smart people involved, because now you have this thing that is super effective and awesome, and they try to make it even more effective and awesome. And at some point it crosses a threshold where now it's more about how addictive we can make this and how profitable we can make this. Because if that was the intent early on, no one would have used it. It wouldn't have been successful. In its essence, it's like it provides this massive service that we enjoy, and that's what gets people on board. And now media in itself has become so much of that same, right? They're only pushing an agenda. There's so many videos out there where newscasters and broadcasters are literally, news anchors are saying the exact same words verbatim when they're signing off or they're signing on. And that synchronization is incredible with how they're just a talking head. And to have that awareness where, like, wow, why would I trust this person and the information they're conveying to me when they're a talking head trying to look a certain way, trying to look trustworthy? And that's how we get into politics too, right? We've mostly been voting for these talking heads. They don't actually do anything that they're talking about. They're just a talking head, and we just hope that our eyes don't deceive us. Well, now we have a ton of people in front of us that are master deceivers instead of actual real politicians that represent their people. They're just all talking heads. So education, holy buckets. Oh, being somebody I've been in school longer than I would ever like to admit, but it seems like a negative, but technically some of the smartest people some of the smartest people I've ever met have been in they're constantly in school, going to another university, taking more classes, some of them. And some of the not so smartest people I've ever met, like me, is they just never leave school because the actual application of their information isn't as interesting as the learning of the information. So I want to start to transfer and do that. That's why I'm doing this. Start applying some of this. I've been a sponge for so long. I need to start getting rid of some of the water, so I can have space for new growth. And obviously with education, the technology in schools, I mean, I shouldn't have to explain that, but just examples is like smart boards or having a text now, like, oh my gosh, almost my entire last year or two of school, I almost never had a physical copy of a book, maybe once or twice. It was always just download it, and then you get access to this book for this long, and then even the digital access ends, which is incredible. Like, it's getting so profitable that now they don't even have to print something. And part of that's our fault, like the convenience, right? But we lose something in that convenience. And entertainment, going and seeing a movie today, like the new Spider-Man movie that has come out. Very, very little of that movie is actually real. It's almost all of it's been contrived to some degree. Him flipping around, obviously he can't do these things. Technology has allowed for our minds to, I still remember when the Titanic came out, they talked about how much that cost to build, like, kind of replica ships and make them sink. And the sheer cost and scale of that was incredible. So, like, that better be something you want to shoot, because it's going to cost you a ton of money. And so some of the best films, even still to today, are ones that they put so much cost in because they want it to be timeless. And some of the reasons for that, and there's a lot of different stuff that ties into that. But the influence of this information, innumerable information, expanse, effectuate, dystopian theory really is applicable in all of these fields, and all the fields are applicable to it. It is the Big Bang theory of information, to summarize. So this is a much longer post than I had intended, but I'm going to be diving back at this here and there and trying to process this more and refine this concept, but ultimately, innumerable information expanse, effectuate dystopian theory. Let's test this theory out. Comment below on what you think and how applicable it is to maybe your field. What are you going to school in? What job do you have? And is there another theory out there already that kind of is similar to this? That's definitely possible. That was one of the things that I tried to look around a bit and just see if there's already a theory that would explain or articulate to this degree. So, to this specificity. So, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on Scatterbrained 2.0. This episode is a little longer, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Went down a few rabbit holes. I'm looking forward to talking about some new ones, and thank you so much. Take care.